Owelo worked with practiced efficiency, creating a circle of white powder around the ancient grave. The substance caught the moonlight like crushed pearls, seeming to pulse with its own inner light. He placed 7 black candles at precise points, their flames burning unnaturally still in the night air. "Remove your shoes," he instructed, his voice taking on a deeper resonance. "The ground we stand on is both blessed and cursed by a century of prayers and tears." Naomi's fingers trembled as she unlaced her shoes. The grass felt wet beneath her feet, but also strangely warm, as if the earth itself was feverish. Owelo positioned her at the head of the grave while Liz stood at its foot, her face eager in the candlelight. The witch doctor began to chant in a language Naomi didn't recognize, not Kikuyu or Swahili, but something older, something that made the air thick and heavy around them. He sprinkled different powders into a small brass bowl, some green as forest shadows, others red as fresh blood, each addition sending up curls of oddly coloured smoke. "The spirits ask why you have come," Owelo said, his eyes now reflecting the candlelight like a cat's. "They want to hear it from your own lips." Naomi swallowed hard. I want my life back. I want success, power, respect." "No," Owelo cut her off sharply. "The truth. They taste your lies like bitter fruit. Tell them what you really want." The words burst from Naomi like water through a broken dam. "I want revenge. I want James to suffer like I've suffered. I want everyone who turned their backs on me to regret it. I want," her voice broke, "I want to never feel helpless again." The candle flames shot upward, turning blue-black. The smoke from Owelo's bowl formed shapes that seemed almost human, dancing around them in a silent procession. Liz's smile grew wider, her teeth gleaming too white, too sharp in the darkness. "Good," Owelo said softly. "Now they know your heart." He reached into his leather bag one final time and withdrew a cloth-wrapped bundle. But power requires sacrifice. The greater the power, the greater the price. He unwrapped the bundle, revealing a knife unlike any Naomi had seen before. Its blade was dark as night, seeming to absorb the candlelight rather than reflect it. The handle was ivory, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe and move when she tried to focus on them. 3 drops freely given, Owelo said, offering her the knife. 1 for what was, 1 for what is, 1 for what will be. Naomi took the knife, its handle warm as living flesh against her palm. This was the moment of truth, the point of no return. The cemetery had gone completely silent. No crickets chirped, no night birds called. Even the distant city sounds had faded away. The world held its breath as Naomi raised the blade to her palm. "Wait," Owelo said, just before the blade touched her skin. "You should know. Once you make this offering, your old life will truly be gone. Everything you were, everything you believed, the spirits will remake you according to your heart's darkest desires. Are you certain this is what you want?" Liz stepped forward, her eyes glittering with an almost predatory anticipation. "Do it, Naomi. Join us. Become what you were meant to be." The knife trembled in Naomi's hand as memories flashed through her mind. James's betrayal, the media's cruel headlines, former friends crossing the street to avoid her, her mother's tearful phone call asking how she could have been involved in such a thing. The blade bit into her palm, and the first drop of blood fell onto the century-old grave. The moment Naomi's blood touched the earth, the candles exploded into pillars of blue flame. The ground beneath their feet began to pulse like a living heart, sending vibrations up through her legs and into her chest. She could feel her own heartbeat synchronizing with this ancient rhythm. 1 drop for what was, Owelo intoned, his voice now layered with other voices, as if a choir of ancients spoke through him. "Your past dissolves." The air around Naomi grew thick and heavy, like honey in her lungs. She felt power coursing through her veins, replacing her blood with liquid darkness. Her senses sharpened. Suddenly she could smell the age of the graves around them, taste the fears and desires of the living and the dead on her tongue. Liz's presence beside her took on a new dimension. She could see now what her friend had become, the price she had paid for her own transformation. Yet instead of feeling horror, Naomi felt only a deep hunger for more. The third drop fell without hesitation. "One drop for what will be," the voices thundered. "Your future beckons." The graves around them split open like ripe fruit, releasing coils of ancient smoke that took on half-formed human shapes. They circled Naomi, whispering secrets of power, revenge, and dark glory. She saw visions of herself seated in boardrooms while former colleagues trembled before her, saw James return to face justice he couldn't escape, saw herself wielding influences that went far beyond mere wealth or social status. The transformation seized her like a fever. Her skin burned, her bones shifted, her very essence realigned itself with powers older than civilization. She screamed, but the sound that emerged was like music, dark and beautiful. She felt her old self burning away, replaced by something magnificent and terrible. "The covenant is sealed," Owelo declared, but now his voice seemed small compared to the chorus of ancients singing in Naomi's blood. "You belong to the night now, and the night belongs to you." When the transformation ended, Naomi opened eyes that saw the world anew. Colors had deeper meanings, shadows held secrets, and the air itself whispered possibilities. She looked at her hands, unmarked now despite the blood she had given, and felt power thrumming beneath her skin like barely contained lightning. Liz approached her, sister now in more than friendship, her smile knowing. "Welcome to your new life," she said, extending her hand. "Shall we begin?" But as they turned to leave, Naomi caught a glimpse of her reflection in a pool of water collected on a fallen headstone. For a moment she saw both what she had been and what she had become. And something else, a shadow of what she would be once the full price of her covenant came due. The sight should have terrified her, but she felt only anticipation. Behind them, Owelo gathered his tools, his work complete. He had given Naomi exactly what she asked for: power, freedom from weakness, the means for revenge. If she had seen the full price in his eyes, the cost that would come due in time, she chose not to acknowledge it. Some prices, after all, were worth paying. As they walked away from the cemetery, the first light of dawn began to bleed into the sky. But for Naomi, the true darkness was just beginning. The board members of Crystal Investment Bank shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs, unable to pinpoint why the morning meeting felt so wrong. Sarah Kamau, who had replaced Naomi as head of investment strategy, kept glancing at the shadows in the corners of the room, swearing they moved against the morning light. "As I was saying," Sarah continued, her voice trembling slightly, "our new strategy for recovering from the New Horizons scandal." The boardroom door swung open silently. Naomi stood in the doorway, transformed. Gone was the desperate woman who had been escorted from the building 1 year ago. She wore power like a bespoke suit, darkness clinging to her like an expensive perfume. Every eye in the room was drawn to her, moths to a deadly flame. "Please," she smiled, showing teeth that seemed just a little too sharp. "Don't stop on my account. I'm fascinated to hear how you've been handling my former clients." "Security!" Chairman Mwangi reached for his phone, but his hand froze midway. Everyone did. Naomi walked slowly around the table, her heels clicking on marble in perfect rhythm with the terrified heartbeats of her former colleagues. "Did you know," she said conversationally, trailing her fingers across the polished table, leaving frost in their wake, "that fear has a taste? Right now, this room is a feast." She stopped behind Sarah's chair. "You took my position so eagerly, Sarah. Tell me, how many of my clients did you convince to stay after spreading those rumors about my involvement in James's scheme?" Sarah tried to speak, to scream, but could only watch as shadows wrapped around her like serpents. In her mind, she relived every lie she'd told about Naomi, every client she'd poached, every smug smile she'd worn while watching her predecessors fall from grace. The shadows squeezed tighter. "I don't want your job back," Naomi whispered in her ear. "I've found a far more interesting career path. But I do want you to understand consequences." With a wave of her hand, every computer in the room flickered to life. Emails, transactions, and documents appeared on screens and projected onto walls. Evidence of Sarah's own fraudulent activities, her secret offshore accounts, her kickbacks, and bribes. Nothing illegal enough to land her in prison, but more than enough to destroy her career and reputation. "Amazing what secrets the darkness whispers," Naomi smiled. "Everyone has them. The question is, who else's should I share?" One by one, she revealed their sins. Chairman Mwangi's affair with his assistant, Director Kimathi's embezzlement, board member Ochieng's insider trading. Each revelation was accompanied by irrefutable evidence that seemed to materialize from the shadows themselves. "Consider this a resignation letter," Naomi announced to the paralyzed board. "Effective immediately, I'm withdrawing all my remaining clients' investments from Crystal Bank. I imagine they'll follow me to my new venture once they learn about these irregularities in your operations." As she walked out, the spell of paralysis broke. Phones began ringing immediately as word of the scandal spread. By sunset, Crystal Bank's stock would plummet, and her former colleagues' reputations would lie in ruins. Outside, Liz waited in a black Mercedes, a proud smile on her face. "Beautifully done," she purred as Naomi slid into the passenger seat. "But that was the easy part. Are you ready for what comes next?" Naomi's phone displayed a news article about James living lavishly in the Maldives, believing himself beyond reach. Her lips curved into a smile that would have made Owolo proud. "Find me everything that lurks in his shadows," she told the darkness coiled around her like a loyal pet. "It's time my dear husband learned that some debts can't be dodged." The shadows pulsed with hungry anticipation, and Naomi felt her power grow stronger. Yet, in the car's mirror, she caught a glimpse of something in her reflection. A darkness growing behind her eyes, spreading like ink in water. The price of power was beginning to show, but she found she no longer cared. "Take me to Owolo," she told Liz. "I need to learn more. Everything he can teach me." James Kimani lounged by his infinity pool, watching the sunset paint the Indian Ocean in shades of gold. He'd chosen this particular villa for its privacy. No extradition treaty meant he could enjoy his fraudulent fortune in peace. Yet lately, something felt off. The shadows seemed longer, the nights darker, the wind carrying whispers he almost recognized. His dreams had become nightmares, filled with familiar eyes watching him from the darkness. He'd wake gasping, swearing he could smell Naomi's perfume in the air, that distinctive mix of jasmine and something else he could never identify. But that was impossible. She was half a world away, probably still crying over her ruined reputation. The first sign that something was truly wrong came when his offshore accounts began to fail. One by one, his carefully hidden nest eggs vanished, transferred to untraceable accounts by forces his bankers couldn't explain. Their computers would go dark, security systems would fail, and in the blackness they swore they saw a woman's smile. Naomi stepped into the Maldivian bank's marble lobby like she owned it, the air conditioning faltering in her presence. Behind her, Liz watched with amused interest as her protégé worked. They'd tracked James across 3 countries, following a trail of bribes, aliases, and hidden accounts. Each step had made Naomi stronger, feeding the darkness inside her with the fear of those who'd helped hide him. James ran. With his accounts frozen and his hiding places exposed, he fled into the tropical night. But every shadow held Naomi's presence now, every darkness concealed her power. The palm trees along the beach reached for him with umbral hands, the ocean's waves whispered with her voice. "Did you think I wouldn't find you?" Naomi's voice carried over the sound of waves. James turned to face his wife, finally understanding what true fear meant. She was barely recognizable now, Power radiated from her like heat from a fire, shadows clinging to her form like a second skin. "I've learned so much, James," she purred, stepping closer. "About power, about justice, about the true nature of darkness." Her smile showed teeth that gleamed too white, too sharp. "Would you like me to teach you?" "Please," he begged. "I'll give you everything, the money, the properties, all of it." "Oh, my dear," Naomi laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "I've already taken all of that. Now I want something far more precious." The shadows around her writhed with anticipation. "I want your future." As dawn broke over the Indian Ocean, Naomi returned to where Liz waited in their car. Behind her, James remained on the dock, alive but forever changed. His hair had turned white, his eyes held the empty look of a man who had seen things no human was meant to witness. He would live. That was part of his punishment. But he would never again know peace. "Was it everything you hoped for?" Liz asked as they drove away. Naomi watched her reflection in the side mirror, seeing how the darkness had spread further through her eyes, how her beauty had taken on an otherworldly quality that both attracted and terrified. "It was a start," she replied, feeling the power pulse beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. "But I think I'm ready for something bigger." In the mirror, her reflection smiled back with teeth that were definitely no longer human. The first signs that something was wrong appeared 3 months after James. Naomi stood in her new penthouse, examining her reflection in the darkened windows. The changes were subtle but undeniable. Shadows moved beneath her skin like ink in water, and her eyes. Her eyes were becoming wells of darkness that never quite reflected light properly. Her new investment firm, Shadow Capital, had become the talk of Nairobi's financial district. Every client meeting ended in her favor, every negotiation bent to her will. But she noticed how plants withered when she passed, how lights flickered in her presence, how even her most loyal employees couldn't maintain eye contact for long. "It's perfectly normal," Liz assured her over drinks at their exclusive club. "The power changes us all differently." But it was more than physical changes. Memories of her old life were fading like old photographs, her mother's face, her childhood home, even her own laughter. She found herself unable to enter churches, crossing the street to avoid them. Holy water left burns that took days to heal. "Beta, please come home," her mother's voice pleaded on voicemail. "Whatever trouble you're in, we can face it together. Just come back to us." But she couldn't. The last time she'd tried visiting her family village, she'd felt the ancient protective prayers woven into the soil burning her feet, saw how the elders recognized something wrong in her, witnessed her young niece burst into tears at her approach. The dreams were getting worse. Each night she saw more of what she was becoming, what she had already become. In her dreams, Owello appeared, no longer the simple-dressed man from the cemetery. "The price," he would say, "is always proportional to the power. You wanted everything, so everything is what it will cost." She noticed it during a corporate takeover, how she could no longer taste food, how music had become just noise, how she couldn't feel the sun's warmth on her skin. The power grew daily, but each increase came with a cost. Simple human pleasures were being replaced by darker hungers. Was it worth it? She asked her reflection one night. The thing that looked back at her smiled with too many teeth. The power had given her everything she thought she wanted. Her enemies were ruined, her business empire grew daily, and her supernatural abilities had expanded far beyond what even Liz had achieved. But she couldn't remember her mother's embrace, couldn't recall her father's voice, couldn't feel joy or sorrow or anything except the constant hunger for more power. The business card felt heavy in her hand. The same type Liz had given her, now inscribed with Owello's details in elegant script. The young woman waited, hope and desperation warring in her eyes. Naomi stood at the precipice of a choice. She could feel the darkness demanding to be fed, the power hungry for another soul. But somewhere deep inside, in a last fragment of her humanity, she remembered her mother's prayers, remembered sunlight and joy and love. The card burst into black flames in her hand. "Run!" she whispered to the woman, fighting against her own transformed nature. "Run, and never look back. Some prices are too high, even for revenge." But as the woman fled, Naomi felt the darkness stir in fury at being denied its prey. The price of defiance, she realized, might be even higher than the price of power. But something inside Naomi had awakened. Memories she thought lost forever began surfacing. Her mother's morning prayers, her father's gentle wisdom, the simple joy of sunlight on her face. Each remembered fragment of humanity was like a knife in the darkness's heart. 1 month later, she stood at her parents' gate in Nyeri. She felt the ancient prayers in the soil, but this time they didn't burn. They welcomed her like a prodigal daughter. Her mother opened the door, and for the first time in years, Naomi could feel tears on her cheeks. "Beta," her mother whispered, "you've come home." The darkness had taken much from her, but it had also taught her the true price of power and the priceless value of the human soul. As her mother held her, Naomi felt the last shadows in her heart give way to light. In her pocket, Owolo's card crumbled to dust, its power over her finally broken. As she walked through the market that morning, greeting vendors she'd helped establish businesses, Naomi felt something the darkness could never give her: genuine joy. Her mother often said she'd been born again, and in a way, that was true. She'd died to power and been reborn to purpose. The price of redemption had been as high as the price of power, but this time she knew it had been worth every cost. The end.